Hello and welcome to the Instructor's Introduction video for White Balance and Time of Day Learning Unit. So I'm going to go through this as though it were a book, so this would be page 1. And on page 1, you have some great information about how to define white balance photographically, with some great links on better understanding fluorescent lights or incandescent, which is also tungsten lights, which are usually oftentimes light bulbs that you might have in your house or city streets. These are becoming a little bit obsolete, but they're still available. And the tone, even if it is an LED light, you can get warm LED lights. Anyways, that's covered later. These are some great links to learn more about magic hour, color cast, color temperature, some important concepts for this learning unit. I'd like for you to start off by watching this 4-minute video, which is an overview of white balance, which I think will be really helpful. And then there's my instructor's lecture, which is about 23 minutes long, along with a PDF for your reference. And in the lecture, I go into more details about the concepts that I want you to take away from this learning unit regarding white balance, the presets in your camera, time of day, observing the natural light. So please take the time to watch that. And then go into a little bit more detail about Kelvin temperature, which is also discussed in the lecture. But I'd also might want to check out this 2-minute video just to really further understand the concept of Kelvin temperature. More information about your camera's preset white balance choices. Most of you have probably been using the auto white balance because that's what your camera or your phone is set to. If you are using a phone for this learning unit, you're probably going to need to be creative or download an app, do the best you can. But there's a lot of information in this learning unit that does really rely on using a camera, and I hope that you get something out of it just by observing the light. There's a lot of things that you can still do to better understand lighting for when you might get a camera. So go through and read this information to be able to have a bit more understanding of your camera settings. And here's a great tutorial that really goes through a lot of this information about white balance, Kelvin temperature, and setting your custom white balance, which is something that some of you might really get into. I'm also going to ask you to think about the time of day and how the quality of light changes throughout the day, the color of the light changes throughout the day. And by getting more familiar with these concepts, it will give you a lot of power as a photographer to think about, well, when do I want to make this portrait of my friend? What would be the best time of day? And so not always relying on someone's schedule, but kind of taking ownership to realizing the best time of day to make a really beautiful portrait. Or like we have here, this is a great example of some work by a student when I've taught this class before. And you can see they photographed the same scene, something that you're going to be doing in this learning unit. But how different this scene looks, either early in the morning, that's right before the sun rises, midday, around 3 to 11 p.m., depending, upon the time of year. But if it's a bright sunny day, the quality of light received. And then during magic hour, how exquisite and different, because this pier has become more of a shape as opposed to a recognizable pier. So all these kinds of choices that you make as a photographer, and when you start to learn about these choices and how that affects your intention, that really starts to set you aside from maybe someone who's just good at point and shoot photography. So read all this information, and this is a great little short video that again talks about the value of thinking about the quality of light when it comes to different times of the day and how if you aren't always able to go out and photograph at the exact time that you'd like to, you can still be more aware of how to use the light as a photographer. Because remember, photography really is painting with light. And then this goes into some details about taking this concept of white balance to a really creative place. And that will also be part of your homework. So review this information. This takes you to a page within the Canvas shell where I go through some information about setting your custom white balance. And you really need to look up online or find your manual or look up your manual online to see exactly what the steps are for the camera that you have. But it's still really great to be able to learn how to do this. So go ahead and check that out as well. But back to playing around. So first you have to learn how to set your custom white balance, and then you can kind of use it creatively. And an easy way to do that is by simply changing your Kelvin temperature, which is discussed in a couple of the videos, or you can try to trick your white balance. And to trick your white balance, I talk a little bit about it, but basically you can photograph almost anything that has a color cast, and you get really close, turn your autofocus off, so you're just filling the frame of your camera with whatever the color is, and know that your image is probably going to come out the opposite of the color on the color wheel, because that's what your camera is programmed to create. So if you photograph something yellow, most likely your picture is going to come out with blue tones, and not everything is going to be blue. So here we have an example of a student's work who probably photographed something reddish yellow. I don't know exactly what they photographed, but you can see then how the tones in this image, not everything is blue, but some things got really blue. And then I know for a fact that this student did a lot of stuff with flashlights, not flashes like the flash on the camera, but just using a flashlight that you could, buy online or at Walgreens, or depending upon how bright you want it to be, a sharp focus flashlight or a diffused. And that's why this part of the frame is more of a neutral color. So they spend a lot of time playing around to get these final results, which is something if you choose to do, you can. And this is, as you're navigating the learning unit, take the time to listen to this video and review the images of some student examples and a PDF for your reference. Here's a bunch of links that will take you to websites outside of the Canvas shell, but these are all really helpful. So I've spent a lot of time kind of curating and mining the internet to find things that I think are going to be best served for you having a better understanding of these concepts of white balance and time of day. So feel free to check out these websites and or watch any of these additional videos. And then the homework assignment for this learning unit. You're going to be making some landscape photos reflecting on these concepts of different time of day and white balance. So I talk about that in this 14-minute video, go over all the details. So please watch this video before attempting to do this assignment. It will really help you to understand there's two parts to this homework project, and I think you'll have a much, much better understanding if you take the time to watch that video before going out and doing the homework. But keep me posted if you have any questions once you've watched the video and read all this information in working towards completing the homework for this learning unit. And then of course there is the weekly quiz, so I can't really show very much of it, but it's available for you to do. And then moving on to, whoops, I'm so sorry. I clicked on the wrong button. Just close your eyes for a second. After the quiz, I've created, well, actually, let me go back. I'm sorry. I've created some extra stuff for you guys. So explore more. So under explore more, there's 3 different pages, and this is like extra information. This goes over setting your custom white balance if you want to check that out. This goes over learning about in-camera metering modes. It's not required, but I just want you to be aware that if you are working with a camera, there are different metering modes, and so you might want to check those out and learn more about them. So I've just started to gather some information to share that with you. So if you are interested in learning about your metering mode, which is what you're using to get your exposure information, there's a couple of videos that I've collected and some information to check that out. And then also, again, this is extra information, but really helpful for you to start thinking about your file format. I'm hoping that most of you are still shooting in JPEG. If you are shooting in RAW, that's fine. Really need to back up those images and not keep them on your computer. That'll really slow down your computer. All sorts of things that we haven't really discussed. I just want you to know that there are some really interesting different ways to think about what file format to use, and that's something that I would go over in the part 2 of this class. So we won't really get into file formats too much, but I've started to gather some information so you just have some basic understanding of the different file formats and some of the advantages and disadvantages to using them. So if you have any questions about the file formats, please feel free to send me an email via Canvas. So for the most part, that takes you through this learning unit of white balance and time of day. There is a lot of information that I'm covering. Hopefully the information that I've curated for you is helpful and of interest. Thank you for listening to my instructor's introduction, and keep me posted with any questions. Have a great learning unit.